we'll be seeing each other still for the last couple of days next week. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Web3 identity on Solana. I can't see you guys back there, so I'm going to stand up. And first of all, I'll just introduce myself in case you haven't met me yet. Please come and say hello. I'm Dan Kelleher. I work at Civic, and I've been working at Civic for about 4 or 5 years now. We've been doing identity on Web3 before Web3 was even a thing, actually, really. We initially started by issuing attestations on Bitcoin, unbelievably these days, and we spent a lot of time on Ethereum, and then we were always kind of involved at the start with Solana, but then when things started getting really crazy gas-wise on Ethereum, and Solana really became an actual product in 2019, we made the jump and have been happy ever since. We all in this room have a problem though, which is, well, we have a few. I'm going to tell us all about them now. One of them is that we all have a problem with wallets, right? We're addicted to the things, and well, it's got to stop. We associate our entire identity essentially on chain with our wallet. I'll just show my speaking notes there. That probably shouldn't have happened, right? Okay, here we go. We're back. We use wallets to log in to sites, especially MetaMask, and Ethereum is doing this quite a lot these days. We prove ownership of NFTs in order to access Discord channels and in order to access increasingly real-world places. Our SNS domains are associated with wallets. We get tickets and tokens sent to our wallets by, when you sign up for events, you put in your wallet address and so on. It's like basically your ID, right? And why is that a problem? Well, a few reasons. First of all, it's insecure. It's inextricably linked to a private key, and if you lose the private key or it's compromised, someone can spoof as you, or you don't have access to your stuff anymore. That's an obvious one. It's inflexible in order to be safe. It requires you to carry a hardware wallet key around, and most people don't do that, and that's not safe in itself. It is also inflexible in that it requires you to basically present the same ID to everyone, and that damages privacy. You can present different IDs to different people, but then you don't have access to the same stuff. It's just not a really good paradigm for identity, in my view, and it's a barrier to entry for non-technical people that really shouldn't have to worry about cryptography, and that is why, for example, non-custodial NFT wallets and crypto wallets in general are becoming more and more common. The larger companies, the organizations that are issuing NFTs, they're not requiring people to install Phantom. They're just saying, congratulations, you with your Google login, this is your NFT. Doesn't make sense. We also have a problem with tokens. So who here has a proof of attendance token in some form or another? They have a token that says, I attended a particular event. Almost everyone. And I mean, I'm not even going to ask who has an NFT. It is a new concept. Really, the NFTs have been around for a while, but a new type of NFT is starting to come out now. Ones that we really associate with ourselves, our identity. It's no longer necessarily a thing that we have. It's no longer just an asset that we want to flip or we want to sell or we want to speculate on its value, but it really tells people something about us. And that has, for better or worse, become the de facto way in which we associate elements of our identity to our public key on chain these days. A token used to mean something different to what it means now. It used to be a common sentence to say, I have X amount of a token in my wallet. Now it's a reasonable question to ask somebody, what does this token mean? What does a token mean? That's weird. And it's kind of good in many ways. And Civic, we issue tokens, identity tokens, what are also called soulbound tokens, non-transferable tokens. we do that, and we do that under very specific circumstances for very specific reasons. But it needs to be thought through. It is not a safe way to associate aspects of people's identity with their identity with a public key on chain, because it is entirely non-private, right? You don't get to decide who assigns what aspects of your identity to you. You can get rid of them, not always, but you can. Usually, you can burn them, but you can't decide what gets sent to your wallet typically. And there's lots of other more nuanced reasons which I won't go into right now. And this leads to basically my main point, which is that we have a real problem with privacy. We tend to think of these things a little bit binarily. Is that a word? Binarily? At least I think so. Maybe, I mean, you guys please talk to me afterwards, but what I tend to hear from the crypto community, the Web3 community, is that it's kind of a binary concept. You're either kind of public, fully public in everything you do, everything's open, your voting and your decisions and opinions on DAOs, the NFTs that you hold, the proof of attendance tokens that you hold, etc. It's all open for anyone to see, or it's private, you're anonymous, you're using an anonymous public key, and you don't share any information, public or otherwise, against that. And that is a bit of a problem, because it's not how we really work in the real world. Normally you have control over your identity to some extent, and you just decide what parts of that identity you can share with others. And that is the dream of what's called decentralized identity or self-sovereign identity. Some of you may have heard about it. This idea that, okay, say Web 2 is very much, I let Google and Facebook decide what happens to my identity and who gets to see it, and usually it's advertisers, right? Web 3, the Web 3 dream or vision of identity is self-sovereign. So information about you is private to you, held by you, and you decide if you want to make it public to the world or not. You decide, if you don't want to make it public to the world, if there are individuals that you wish to pass that to in order to obtain services. And actually, this binary nature of privacy is another barrier to entry, especially for institutional investors in DeFi, for example, who need to know certain aspects of their counterparties. They don't need to know everything, but they need to know certain things. And keeping institutional money out of crypto is a goal for some people, and that's okay. It's holding DeFi back. If you imagine the sort of the sort of yields that you're getting now compared to the sort of yields when institutional investors are able to get involved, and there would be really night and day. But there are other problems, other things that are holding the space, other spaces in crypto that are being held back by this binary attitude towards privacy. For example, DAOs a lot of DAOs are suffering from Sybil attack, or basically they're unable to determine the difference between 1,000 public keys owned by one individual and 1,000 public keys owned by 1,000 individuals. And that has an impact on the types of voting mechanisms that they're able to introduce. I'll talk a bit more about that maybe a bit later. Right, so my thesis and the thesis of Civic is that Web3 needs an identity layer. It needs a proper, effectively a primitive layer for identity that goes beyond the public key. And then we need to, first of all, work out what we mean by identity. I've already said it's more than just a public key. I also want to dispel this idea that it's KYC in any sense. KYC is an aspect. It's a useful aspect in many cases. There's everyone's gone through KYC, and it's a pain, and probably because the organization that they went through it with was doing it wrong. It is an important aspect, but it's more than that. Identity is all that you are, all that you do, and all that you have. Maybe biting off more than I can chew there, but it's true. So how is Civic what is Civic building then? What does Civic mean by an identity layer? So we're building tools, infrastructure, and products. What you see here is a product. This is Civic Me. This is basically an identity portal. At the moment, it's focusing on all that you have, but all that you are is also in there as well. There's a product, we've released a second product called Civic Pass, And this is this token that I was talking about earlier. I'll get to that a little bit later. But essentially, it will also allow you to store information about yourself that you can then share to other individuals. Altogether, the plan is for it to collect your activity across Web3, various chains, various protocols, and allow you to manage it and view it and share it as you see fit. But CivicMe is just one product. Underneath that, it's based on 3 fundamental technologies. I don't know if anyone's heard of decentralized identifiers. So DIDs, or DIDs as they're also called, is self-sovereign identity. If there's one thing that everybody involved in self-sovereign identity agrees in, it's DIDs as a standard. And it's effectively, let me start by just summarizing the whole thing before I go deep into DIDs, because I will end up not shutting up about them otherwise. So CivicMe will look up your DID. You all actually already have a DID, you just don't know it, because we have built a protocol on Solana which implements DIDs, and every public key is automatically kind of upgraded to a DID by default. But you can also do more with a DID. You can think of it basically as a wallet abstraction layer, so you can combine multiple wallets together. You can combine wallets and public keys and addresses across chain, and the programs that are DID aware will recognize that 2 wallets you connect to the same DID are the same individual. And this is useful for key recovery and things like that, which I'll talk about later. So yeah, your identity on CivicMe is a DID, not a wallet, and your DID contains a number of wallets that are linked to it. And all of those wallets contain tokens. So the owner of this DID is provably the owner of all the tokens, regardless of which wallet they're presenting as. So if you have a token stored in your cold wallet, you can prove ownership of it with your hot wallet. That's the simplest way of thinking about it. The DID also contains access to a number of credentials, which is effectively your personal information about yourself that you can then share to other individuals, and it's private, stored locally, or stored in some storage that you control, not on-chain, and encrypted by the keys that are in your DID, so that you only can read it unless you choose to share it with other people. Finally, as well as tokens, you can have Civic passes, which are a form of token. Civic pass, I will get to in a minute, actually. I'm gonna respect the order of my slides. They will thank me later. I say that, but I just skipped DIDs. Any questions on DIDs, and or do I need to clarify it anymore, because it's kind of an important first point? Yeah.
And then CivicMe then is the permissions layer for the user storage, so I control all the access.
CivicMe is a portal, and the DIDs effectively are the permission layer. Yeah.
There's a permission layer now. Yeah. If I was to change the permissions, though, I do that in CivicMe, right?
Yes, that would be a mechanism by which you could do it. But we want to make sure that everything basically below this line, including Civic Pass actually, and I'll get to that. Everything below this line is open source. Civic doesn't have any particular power over your identity. That's really important. I wouldn't use an identity layer on Web3 that granted any individual organization that sort of power. We're building the tools, and we're building the products that make the tools worth using, effectively. Okay. Let's jump to Civic Pass, actually, while we're on the subject of tokens. So I've already mentioned there's lots of different types of tokens, PFPs, DAO governance tokens, community membership NFTs, etc., etc. Civic Pass is another one of those. And they come in various flavors, and these flavors basically grant different types of token to your wallet. So you can think of them essentially as non-transferable NFTs or soulbound tokens. And they effectively, they're intended to be used essentially by smart contracts. So a smart contract or program, like we've integrated into, among others, these 3 programs that you've probably heard of: Serum for DeFi, for permission DeFi, regulated DeFi, or regulation ready DeFi, I should say. SPL governance, which is the DAO program on Solana for proof of uniqueness and others, and Metaplex for bot resistance. They all check the passes that a wallet or a DID contains, and if they contain the correct passes, then they will allow access to the protocol. That's basically how that works. So it's similar to NFT gating, which you've also probably seen, but there's, I'd say, two main differences between a pass and an NFT in that sense. The first is that it's intended by definition to be soul-bound, associated with a DID rather than transferable. You can make NFTs non-transferable, but this is that way by default. And secondly, it's based on a decentralized network. So you can see that Civic in this diagram belongs to a gateway network, and the gateway network issues a pass. So a pass may have different flavors. Let's maybe say a proof of personhood, prove that you're a real person and not a bot, for example. A network of organizations have the power to issue that pass, and that network is governed by a non-profit called identity.com. We'll be moving towards a DAO structure soon, and Civic is just one of other potential providers that can issue that pass. That's very different often to an NFT gating sort of situation. At best, you've got an NFT that is governed by a multisig, and multisig allows multiple organizations to issue NFTs, but usually it's one particular private key that can mint that NFT, and that's used for gating. And that is, I would say, the main difference. I would say that this Civic Pass idea is really subtle because it is issuing tokens against a wallet or against an identity, but we want to be very circumspect about, at least Civic wants to be very circumspect about what type of tokens we want to issue. We don't want to just issue every single possible aspect of your identity as a separate pass. A pass that says you live in Germany, a pass that says you're over 18, a pass that says you're under 19, a pass that says that you got brown hair or whatever. That would be obviously no better than making all the information about you public in the first place. But we do want to issue passes such as proof that you're not operating from an OFAC sanctioned country, or proof that you are a person, or even proof that you are unique. Those are privacy preserving, and I think they skate the line quite well between what protocols need to know in order to protect their protocols or protect their users, and from regulation, among other things, and what you're willing to present. And Civic.me allows you to manage them and later on revoke them as well if you want to. But really it comes down, the difference between that and other forms of tokens that are issued to a wallet comes down to the set of principles or pillars of how you issue tokens and what types of tokens you issue. I went through that. I talked quite fast through all that. Are there any questions or, again, requests for clarification on any of that? Cool. So I just want to quickly mention one last point that is part of the Web3. Sorry, did you hand your hand up there? Just stretching. I realized I was looking down when I was asking if anyone had any questions, so I wouldn't have seen it anyway. So DIDs, tokens, and the third part of a Web3 identity layer is something called verifiable credentials. So I didn't briefly mention them in the previous diagram, right back here, the yellow bit, information that's stored locally about yourself. Anyone can really issue a verifiable credential about anyone. It's basically, the question is what that credential contains and whether you trust the issuer. So you can think of it as basically an attestation or a claim made by one individual about another individual. So Civic will issue a verifiable credential saying that your name is this, this is your birth date, and this is where you live, and potentially also this is what you look like. We will issue that to you, and you will keep it stored in your private storage in Civic.me. And then you can share the information to anyone you like. If you want to, for example, you're on a messaging protocol and you want to be sure about who you're talking to, you can ask them for a verifiable credential verifying their name, for example. That's very different, obviously, from Civic issuing a token on chain that says what your name is. So these verifiable credentials are off chain. They're stored locally or in a GDPR compliant storage, a storage where you can provably, or at least you have the right to delete them. And they are encrypted with a key that you own, and they are signed with a key that we own, so that somebody can verify that we are the issuer of that credential. That is the third bit. Very quickly, some use cases. I've mentioned them all already, so I'll just mention them again in case I forgot one. Account recovery. Forget credentials, forget tokens, just think about DIDs for this one. You have two tokens, you have two wallets on your DID, your hot wallet and your cold wallet. You accidentally copy your private key to a bad wallet and it gets hacked and everyone tells you you shouldn't use that wallet anymore and you have to get rid of your hot wallet. Now you have still, if you have your assets and your identity associated with your DID, this wallet abstraction, rather than the hot wallet, it doesn't matter. You can throw away the hot wallet, you can replace it with another one, you can replace it with 10 of them. It's all fine. The rest of the world will only see your DID. They won't see that hot wallet address. Regulation readiness, like I said, we built a protocol, or we worked with Solrise on a DEX based on Serum last year that only provided access to users that weren't in OFAC sanctioned countries, and that allowed some market makers to gain access to Serum that otherwise weren't able to or weren't willing to use Serum. We think this is a good blueprint for a future regulation compliant blockchain and DeFi suite, put it that way. And this sort of model allows that while still maintaining privacy. Democratic DAOs, I also mentioned that one. So we have a Civic Pass flavor called Proof of Uniqueness, which is a token that you can gain access to with only one account. It associates it with your identity, such that it is to work against the Sybil attack or Sybil problem. So a DAO the DAOs on Solana effectively now are limited to either $1, one vote, or at best one NFT, one vote. And there's really no way of allowing any other kind of more democratic models, such as one person, one vote, or if anyone's heard of quadratic voting, Gitcoin uses quadratic funding on Ethereum, and they've stated very plainly, very many times, that Sybil attacks are the biggest barrier to scalability of their model, which otherwise is extremely successful. Civic Pass and Uniqueness Pass is a use case for that and for DAOs. And that's all I've got. So I just got a few links, because I think there's a lot of developers in the room, and I want to make it a little bit more concrete. The best place to go, especially for Civic Pass, is docs.civic.com. Best place to go for DIDs is docs.identity.com or talk to me. And if you don't get time to talk to me now, then join our Discord. There's a link on www.civic.com right down at the bottom, the Discord button. Please join us and continue the discussion. Nobody has all the answers when it comes to identity on Web3. Most of my work is convincing people that it's a thing, but I don't want us to prescribe what it is exactly, or how the best way to use it. And everyone has ideas, so please come to me and talk to me, and we'll continue the discussion here on Discord or also on Twitter. And thanks very much for your attention on a balmy Sunday afternoon in Berlin. Thanks very much.